So this is probably like one of my most embarrassing moments in my software engineering career. So what's up YouTube? In today's video, we're going to talk about how I miserably failed my software engineering interview at Google. If you're new to the channel, make sure you hit the subscribe button below. Also hit the like button, it helps out the channel. And without further ado, let's go ahead and get into this video. So to kick things off, we got to talk about what led up to me actually failing this interview. So give you guys a story in the background. First things first, I graduated college in 2015. When I graduated college, I already had a full-time job as a software engineer. I was already working prior to like about a year before I graduated. So about 6 months after I graduated, I pretty much got to this point where I was like, okay, I feel like I want to work for another company. But then I'd say about a good 7 to 8 months before I got to this point, I was already studying iOS engineering. I was pretty good at it. I had about 10 apps I had already built. 3 apps were already in the App Store. Please don't look at them. They're horrible as I look at them now. But yeah, I felt like I was pretty good to go ahead and get hired somewhere else. So took my leap of faith, applied for a couple of companies and see where they were gonna land me. And applying for all these companies, the one company that did contact me back relatively quickly was St. Jude. Interviewed at St. Jude, interview went phenomenal. They loved the apps that I had built. I showed them the apps in person, like I had apps downloaded on my phone. So we was able to go through the apps. I was able to show them what was going on with those apps. I think one was like a Pokédex app I had built, which was really cool. They thought it was nice. They loved the UI and everything and so forth from there. The code looks good and all. So after that, I pretty much knew I was probably gonna get an offer from St. Jude. So immediately after, not even, I want to say like the next day, I got an email from a recruiter. The recruiter was from Google, shockingly enough. So I got this email from Google, contacted the recruiter back immediately. And the recruiter told me that they were looking for an iOS engineer. So obviously me learning iOS engineer, I was like, okay, this is perfect. I would love to work for you guys. But I did let them know that, hey, you know, I was already in the process of possibly getting hired by St. Jude. So the recruiter took the information I gave and she said, okay, let me see if I can get in touch with one of our iOS engineers and see if I can get you on the phone with them to try to see if we can kind of fast track you into our hiring process. So I said, that's totally fine. Hung up the phone with the recruiter. Probably like 10 minutes afterwards, the recruiter contacted me right back and said, hey, I do have an iOS engineer. Are you ready to talk? So I said, sure, you know, I can go ahead and do the interview with the iOS engineer. Now, mind you, I was thinking I was probably gonna have to bring up like a Google Doc or something like that. I wasn't sure how this was gonna go. So I was trying to make sure I was near my computer. So at this point, the iOS engineer just got on the phone. They asked me 5 questions. Kind of funny. The 5 questions were somewhat difficult, but not super difficult. When I think about it now, they were relatively easy. One question was a trick question. I'm not gonna say what it was, but the question the engineer gave me was a trick question. And I explained why it was a trick question, because it wasn't a yes or no answer or a one way of solving this kind of problem. Afterwards, what was funny was the engineer just said, okay, and hung up the phone. So I was like, all right, maybe I just totally bummed this. I have no earthly idea. So what even 30 seconds later, got the call back from the recruiter. So I'm thinking the recruiter's gonna say, hey, you totally failed this. We're gonna go with another candidate. Sorry, you know. The recruiter actually said that the engineer thought I did great, which I was shocked to hear. They said they wanted to go ahead and move forward with me coming out to Mountain View, California for an on-site interview. So I said, all right, cool, like I'm on board. So this is where the interview gets crazy, interview process rather, gets crazy. So they sent me a packet of information I needed to know. I read through the packet and I was like, what the heck? Like some of those data structures and algorithms in the packet, I did know. Some of them I haven't really touched at all. I've had like a brief overview in college of some of them, but some of them I didn't have like in-depth knowledge around. And so without going into too much detail, I'll give you like a small observation around what I saw. One was like red and black trees, which I had heard about, but I had never really fully touched before. Some of the other ones were just like different types of problems that I probably should like look into. One that I could remember was like the traveling salesman problem, things like that. I had never fully done before, heard about them, but never worked them out on paper or in code like that. So I took the information that was on the sheet and I decided like, okay, let me try to see where can I go to make sure I fully know all this. So this was before LeetCode, at least before I knew anything about LeetCode. I don't think anyone was even using LeetCode, or I don't even know if the site was up at the time. Only thing I knew that most people were using were the Cracking and Coding interview book. So I went to Barnes & Noble, grabbed the Cracking and Coding interview book, and tried to go through it. Now, mind you, I only had a week prior to this interview. So you can probably know beforehand, like, yeah, bro, you probably failed the interview. Yeah, of course. But me being me, I'm just knowing like, no, I'm gonna pass this interview. I'm learning this information and I'm gonna be good. I got the book. The book is like thick, like it's pretty huge. If you don't have the book, I highly recommend you getting it and trying to go through the book. It's a great way to kind of get you started prior to going ahead and getting hired, or going through the interview rather. But if you've never touched data structure and algorithms like at all, this isn't the book for you personally. I would suggest you go through a different route to make sure you learn data structures and algorithms first. Then this book will kind of just help like regurgitate some of the information you've already learned, and it gives you a couple of little problems to go through. It gives some details around the tricks around some problems that you may see. But honestly, you do better nowadays just kind of going through LeetCode and just grinding through LeetCode problems and finding a course that just teaches you all the information you need to know. But back to the story. Got the book, tried to go through all the information in the book. Obviously didn't have time to. A couple of sections I didn't get a lot of detail around were trees, bit manipulation. Some of those I just didn't have the time to fully study. But I felt like I was pretty decent with like linked list, stacks, linked list, stacks, queues. Some array problems I was decent around, but some of the other areas like graphs I wasn't great at. Trees, not so good. But anywho, I just felt like, okay, I do decently for this interview. From there, I got flown out to Mountain View. On the plane, I got sick because it was so cold on the plane. So from this day forward, I always bring a hoodie or a blanket just because I got sick going to Mountain View, California. Got there, never forget, I was running a fever. I ran into a Target, had to get some medication so I can go home, take that, or at least go to the hotel and take it. And I studied for probably like an hour at the hotel. And the rest of the time while I was at the hotel, I had no time to like try to go look at Mountain View and, visit anything. I just went to the hotel, took the medicine, and hopefully that was gonna help me the next day. So the next day I did feel a little bit better. Went through the interview and totally bombed it. Like, I never forget, I walked in the room, the guy asked me the first question, and I was just completely like lost. I remember standing at the whiteboard with the marker in my hand, just looking like, yeah, I have no earthly idea where to even freaking start. I was totally embarrassed. And from there, it was like embarrassment after embarrassment after embarrassment, because I went through 5 rounds of interviews. And being honest with you, after that first interaction with the engineer, I almost just wanted to go home, but I couldn't. I had to go through the rest of the interview. And going through the rest of the interview, I honestly just try to be as transparent as possible and just let the engineer know, like, hey, some of these problems that I'm getting, like, I've never heard of before. I don't even know how to like start the problem. Granted, I would like try to work through the problem, but like, if you haven't sat down and fully learned all these data structures in and out, there's no way you're going to solve some of these problems, especially something like a traveling salesman problem. Unless you've seen it before, you have no idea how to even start the problem. Backtracking, another one, same thing. It's just different things like that. If you haven't taken the time to learn them, you're not going to pass them. There's just no way. Especially when you're trying to optimize the problem and things like that. So I remember talking to some of the engineers. They were pretty honest with me, and they just let me know like, hey, some of us have felt this interview before. One person told me they felt it like 3 times before they finally got hired. I remember one person telling me they cried during the interview just because they just felt like a failure going through the process. So it did make me feel a little bit better. But the one thing I will say is I didn't even need to talk to the recruiter after the interview was over with. When I went back home, I knew for sure I felt it, like with flying colors. When I got back home, all those questions that I got, I did take the time to learn them and, look things up on how to solve those type of problems. And from that day forward, I said that I would never go into an interview unprepared. And ever since then, every interview I've gone through, most of the time I do either extremely well or pretty well enough to get like the green light, like, okay, we probably do want to hire this candidate, because I made sure I knew those data structures. I made sure I took the time to study a lot. There were so many different areas of iOS development at that time I didn't even know about. that the interviewer felt as though, well, you're interviewing for iOS engineer at Google, you should know all these areas of iOS development, but I didn't know. Which is why I say that, you can't just strictly learn the data structures. Depending on what stack you go into, you can't just learn just the data structure. You need to understand how that language you're using, it works with the entire system. How is it built from the ground up? What's the ins and outs of that language or that stack that you're using? What are the trade-offs of one thing versus another? But yeah, again, failed the interview miserably. And from that day forward, I took the time to study. As of now, today, at least every single day, at least once a week, I do a typing test every day. I call it my programming workout. I take a typing test. I try to solve at least one leak code problem. And I do this every single day before I even start doing any kind of work. And this just makes sure I build a muscle memory and I fully understand how to work these problems out and I get decent at them. But yeah, that was my journey and how I went through failing at Google. Now, gratefully, I did get hired at St. Jude, so that was good. But yeah, once I got on at St. Jude, my mindset switched on like the things I needed to know in order to pass these interviews. So my big tip for you guys is make sure you take the time to study, use LeetCode, use HackerRank, use Algo Expert. And again, none of these are sponsored, but they're gonna help you get to that sweet spot that I feel like you'll be happy that you've taken the time to fully learn everything. Because at that time, no one was teaching me this stuff. I had to just go learn on my own. So again, thanks you guys for watching the video, and I'll see you in the next one. See you.